You're alone in your room. Nobody's home. Nobody's coming over. The door is locked and the curtains are drawn. And then you do something, you fix your posture. If you think about it for too long, it gets genuinely weird, right? Not because a noise startled you or you remembered something you had to do. You just adjusted. Sat up a little straighter. Maybe switched your face without knowing why. Spent 1/2 second of managing yourself for an audience that doesn't exist. And the moment passes. You don't think about it again. But it happened. It happens to almost everyone. People like me talk to themselves out loud when they're alone, then feel embarrassed. They apologize after bumping into furniture. They rehearse arguments in the shower with a level of performance that makes anyone believe they're expecting a standing ovation. They close a browser tab, heart beating a little faster, even though the only person who could see the screen is them. This isn't quirky. It's not just nerves. Your brain is running a system that was never meant to switch off. And you'll understand now what that system actually is, and we'll start to look at your own private moments very differently. Somewhere in your skull is a piece of neural machinery whose only job, its entire reason for existing, is to detect eyes. I don't mean faces or people. Actual eyes. Specifically, whether any eyes in your environment are pointing at you. Researchers call it gaze detection, and it is one of the oldest, most deeply wired instincts in the human brain. It's been proven that people can sense, below the threshold of conscious awareness, the difference between a gaze aimed directly at them and one aimed just a few degrees to the side. You can't always articulate it. You just feel it. That prickle. That stir in the room. This sensitivity didn't appear by accident. For most of human history, the question, "Is something watching me?" was a survival question. A predator's gaze meant you had seconds. A hostile stranger's gaze meant trouble was forming. The humans whose brains were slower to register watching eyes died off with no offspring. The ones who were wired to feel watched, even when the threat was ambiguous, even when there was nothing there, they survived more often. Your brain learned from that. Over tens of thousands of generations, it was shaped to err on the side of finding eyes everywhere. To treat the sensation of being watched as information worth acting on, even when the source of that sensation is invisible. Even when there's nothing there at all. The cost of a false alarm was a moment of unnecessary panic. The cost of missing a real one was death. Your brain picked the false alarms. And that's not all. Now, you might be thinking, okay, evolutionary wiring, that makes sense in a forest. But in your locked bedroom, at 11 at night, with nobody for miles? That's different. Except your brain doesn't really do that's different. In the early 1970s, 2 psychologists ran a set of experiments that revealed something quietly unsettling about human self-perception. They put people in front of mirrors and then watched what happened. The moment people could see themselves, they started behaving as though they were being evaluated. They became more honest, more careful, more likely to act in line with their stated values. Not because anyone was watching, but because the possibility of observation had been introduced. Their own reflection was enough to trigger the feeling of being seen, and the feeling of being seen changed everything. The researchers called what they'd produced objective self-awareness, the state of suddenly experiencing yourself from the outside, as an object rather than a subject. And what made their follow-up findings even stranger was the discovery that a mirror wasn't the only trigger. Hearing your own voice played back. Imagining someone else's perspective. Simply knowing a camera existed in the room, even an inactive one. Any of these was enough. The brain didn't need a real audience. It needed the concept of one. Which means at some level, the audience is always there. Built in. Generating a faint but continuous sense that your behavior is observable, and therefore, that it should be managed. You felt this. You've probably never had a name for it before. So there it is, right? Ancient wiring plus self-awareness quirks. Case closed. Except that explanation was built for a world that stopped existing a long time ago. And something has happened in the meantime that changes the scale of this problem entirely. There are over 1 billion surveillance cameras currently operating on Earth. 1 billion. There was a controlled study in 2024 on what surveillance actually does to human perception. They put participants under CCTV cameras and measured something. Not their behavior, but their involuntary sensory processing. What they found was this. People being watched by cameras became faster at detecting faces, at a level completely below conscious awareness. Nearly a full second faster. They weren't trying to be more alert. They didn't know it was happening. The mere presence of surveillance had rewired, in real time, how their brains automatically scan the world. And the researchers noted that the hypersensitivity to gaze that surveillance produced looked, neurologically, like patterns associated with anxiety and early-stage psychosis. Of course, those people weren't mentally ill. Rather, the system that normally fires in moments of genuine threat was being artificially kept on. Now add the other layer. Every platform you use was designed by people who understood, down to the engineering level, that the feeling of being observed changes behavior. The follower count is visible. The view counter is public. The read receipt exists. You post something alone in your apartment, and your brain immediately generates an audience, real people, hypothetical people, people who haven't seen it yet, people who might screenshot it. You are alone, and your brain is performing. You spend 20 minutes writing a caption that people will scan in 2 seconds. You delete a post not because anyone complained, but because you imagine someone might. You rehearse what you're going to say on a voice note before recording it, alone, in your car. The gaze detection system that evolved to keep you alive in the wild is now running almost continuously, fed by cameras, platforms, comment sections, read receipts, and the low hum of a culture that has made visibility the primary currency of social life. The full psychological cost of that? We honestly don't fully know. The research on chronic low-level surveillance is still catching up. What we do have is enough to say, this is not small, and it is not neutral. So what does it practically mean for your life? Think about how rarely you have a moment that feels genuinely unobserved. Not physically, you already have those. But mentally, a moment where no version of an audience exists in your head. Where you're not composing, managing, or running a quiet background check on how your behavior would look from the outside. Those moments are getting rarer. And that matters because the version of you that exists without an audience, the one that makes decisions based on what you actually want, thinks thoughts you haven't pre-approved, sits in an empty room without straightening up, that version doesn't get much practice anymore. Living under a constant imagined gaze is exhausting in a way that's hard to name, partly because it never peaks into something you can point at. It just runs. Low, continuous, draining in the way that background noise is draining. You stop noticing it, but you don't stop being affected by it. The first step may not be a solution. It's just paying attention to the moment, the one where you catch yourself performing for an empty room. Don't dismiss it. Sit with it for a second. Ask what you were managing and for whom. Because somewhere in the gap between who you are when nobody's watching and who you are when you think someone might be, that gap is worth knowing about. The room was empty. The audience was inside you the whole time.